On June 30th, the village of Lytton, BC became engulfed in flames, leaving residents just minutes to turn their back on life as they knew it in order to flee for safety. Since then, politicians and mainstream media alike have ran with theories that a passing train and climate change were the culprits of the devastating fire. Yet despite Lytton, BC being in close proximity to where the spree began of now just under 50 churches to be burnt or vandalized across Canada shortly after the first announcements of the locating of unmarked grave sites near residential schools, there was no public exploration as to whether or not Lytton, which is home to a residential school and old churches, may have fallen victim to yet another church arsonist. For those of you who are concerned about the frequent attacks on Christian places of worship, please sign our petition right now at saveourchurches.ca. The lack of response from the federal, provincial government, and also from the RCMP is alarming. It not only continues to put Christian communities at risk, but also the surrounding areas that could be subjected to a fire that gets out of control. Is that what took place in Lytton, BC? We don't know. That's one of the reasons why myself and my colleague Matt Brevner drove as close as we safely could to Lytton, BC. We wanted to explore those theories as well as hear from people who fled Lytton themselves about what they think had happened and from the voices of experts as well. You'll hear from those people in this report, but before I show it to you, I want to let you know if you appreciate the journalism that we do with our boots on the ground, you can help support us. We do these reports based on donations from people like you, so donate whatever you can at rebelfieldreports.com. We appreciate your support. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and it's no surprise that when a fire wipes out 90% of a village, people want answers, and they also want to know how to prevent it from happening again.
As far as I know, just from hearing from people that managed to stay behind, they said there's nothing left to our home and vehicles and RVs. And an elderly mom had a house too, and she lost that. So that's all gone. So I guess pretty well the whole reserve's gone.
The people that fled Lytton fled many places, and they had to do so fast. One of those places is the city of Merritt. It's about 58 kilometers from Lytton. And behind me, they've set up a reception center. Inside, they have water, they have food and donations. People can go in and cool down as they wait to find out exactly what state their homes are at. We were told we're not allowed to film inside, but we're going to see if there's anybody who comes out who's ready to share their story. So I know that there was a train on fire.
That was a CN train.
Okay, but did you guys hear any new news that actually says that was the start of the fire? Because I think
nobody has said. They just went. It's people started, which we all know because there were no lightning strikes or anything. So obvious it would have been human started.
Yeah. It seems like it's kind of switching a little bit from it being from the train to possibly something else.
Well, that's in CN's benefit, right? They're pushing hard to have that come through, so they're not held responsible for the damage.
And of course, they want the trucks going again for money, right? So they're marshalling in Spence's Bridge to go into the evacuation order area to start work on the bridge that got burned and the tracks that got burned. And we're like saying, no, like people come first. So how come the people who live there that this means most to aren't allowed in?
But what are the most prominent theories about what caused the fire in Lytton? Former Lytton Mayor Chris O'Connor told Global News that, in his mind, there's no doubt the fire was started by a train going through the area. So one of the first things we did was get as close as we could to Lytton, as well as close to the tracks that let the trains pass right through it. So this is about as far as you can get for the moment. We're in Spence's Bridge. It's about 35 kilometers northeast of Lytton, and smoke is definitely still in the air here, although it's a little less than it has been in the more recent days since the fire. According to the BC Coroner's Office, with the assistance of the RCMP and the special investigations team that they have, they were able to safely access the site a couple of days ago to confirm 2 fatalities in Lytton. The final moments of what happened to the 2 who lost their lives in this fire are outlined by their own son here.
I was always told, get down low as you can. I said, Mom, get down. And she went down in. My dad come out and he says, where's your mom? He's down in the hole. And everything's just going right up. So my dad went down in there and there just happened to be a piece of tin or something there. And I slid it over and I almost went in with them. I hesitated and I was not in the room. And I pulled the piece of sheet over and I ran.
The only spot he could think of that wouldn't burn was the gravel on the nearby railway tracks. He lay there for 45 minutes waiting out the fire.
I went back up to the house and I was yelling and screaming for my mom. I yelled and screamed, Mom, Dad, and I came up and I seen what was left of my mom.
Both the CP and the CN rail make their way through here. And like I said, at least one train is still running. Now, there were witnesses who said they saw a train burning. Take a look at this.
Oh, is the train on fire?
Gary Phelps and his wife alerted fire officials and then went back to the scene to find a much more serious situation.
When we went by originally, it was a very small fire. And by the time we got back, it was fully engulfed. And then the train started to catch on fire and it was carrying wood and that kind of stuff. And the train was fully engulfed.
Shortly after being present at those very tracks, we heard reports from the RCMP that the footage of the train passing through with smoke around it was not determined to have taken place during the fire, as well as inside of Lytton, BC. But exactly how common is it for trains to cause fire in hot and dry areas? Well, apparently, it's not completely unheard of. In fact, CN was ordered to pay just last year over $16 million for a fire that they were deemed to be responsible for that took place just outside of Lytton, BC. I also spoke with Jennifer Miss-Livy, the public affairs specialist from the National Integrity Fire Center, to find out just how these fires can start from trains.
Railroad fires are one of the was part of the national fire cause categories. So it's been common enough that it's been identified as one of the fire causes, human fire causes. Couple of the ways that railroad fires could possibly start is through exhaust. So the exhaust pipe, when they're either going up or they're going down a hill, a lot more exhaust is going to go out. And so that has been known to cause fire. So those exhaust particles are really hot. I don't exactly know the temperature, but they'll get into brush and grass, and then they can start a wildfire. Another way they can start fires is grinding of the brakes. So just like a vehicle, the brake pads wear down, and so then you have metal on metal grinding. And just like a vehicle brakes, they'll emit sparks, and those sparks will go into grass adjacent to the railroad tracks. So those are kind of the 2 areas that we fire investigators look when they're looking at railroad caused fires, is either the exhaust or brakes. Also, they do maintenance on the railroad tracks, and so that's been known to cause fires, is grinding of the tracks to maintain them or fix a part. That has known also sparks emit from the grinding as well, and can get into grass. The winds pick up and the fire takes off. So that's also for equipment fires too. We've seen that grinding multiple places, but those are a couple of the main things that we see when we're looking at railroad caused fires.
You know that popular Winston Churchill quote, "Never let a crisis go to waste"? Well, sometimes you got to wonder if that's what's happening here when it comes to how media and politicians have been reporting on the fire. I was recently doing a report that you can find at rebelnews.com where I questioned John Horgan as well as Justin Trudeau. And at their first appearance in BC, they spoke about the fires.
So the commitment and dedication of the people of Lytton is deeply moving, and our commitment and the commitment of the federal government and other partners, quite frankly, across the country, is to make sure that we can rebuild Lytton back better as a climate-focused community, a fire-safe community. The hottest place in Canada year after year after year, an unprecedented heat, and both the Prime Minister and I are acutely aware that this climate change phenomenon is not a one-time thing, although it was a once-in-a-thousand-year episode. We're going to see events like this more and more. That's why we're going to be both going to Glasgow in the fall to COP to talk about the plans we have here in British Columbia through Clean BC and how we can continue to collaborate, keeping in mind that British Columbia is 5 million souls in a sea of 7 billion. Climate change requires international focus, not just British Columbia focus, not just Canada focus, but we stand together on this issue to make sure that the world understands we're seeing it here year after year. We need to take immediate action, and that's our plan. I know that's the plan of the federal government as well.
You hear that, folks? The fires have just begun. That's why climate change action must happen, and we must all comply to lowering our carbon emissions. Not China, of course, Canada. But you know what? Maybe Horgan's right. Maybe there are more fires that happen. There's some happening right now. That's because fires are not rare in British Columbia. In fact, they're not rare to Lytton, BC. Back in the 1930s, Lytton had a horrible fire that burnt the village to the ground. Nevertheless, we're seeing article after article saying this is a climate change matter, and some of the residents close to the Lytton area feel the same way.
Climate change has been happening for a long time, but it seems to me like no one's listening. And all of us as Indigenous people, we are supposed to be the caretakers of Mother Earth. But then there's so many things happening with the residential school, how they compressed us in certain ways. But when we do our ceremonies, some of the ceremonies after that, we keep track of prophecies. And that's what they said is that in the prophecies, Mother Earth is going to just get in a rage. You know, there's going to be things like the fire, floods, tornadoes. And when that happens, it's like Mother Earth is cleaning up this pandemic right here. Look how many people died from the pandemic, and it's just worldwide. And then during our ceremonies, after our ceremonies, we just say to all our people worldwide, just stay alive, because it's going to be our time. But we have to teach the rest of the world, all races, the red people, the yellow people, the black people, that we all need to work together to look after Mother Earth.
But what's the other side of the story when it comes to us being told that fires like what happened at Lytton, BC are due to climate change? I reached out to Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science to find out.
It's always interesting how wildfires seem to provoke a sense of, Dante's Inferno or the burning fire and brimstone because you're so guilty for using your car, when wildfires are not related to climate change. They're related to the condition of the actual stand of trees and the fuel load beneath it and various aspects of humidity and such like, which you can see actually on the Canadian Wildland interactive maps. Anyone can see how those conditions change day to day. So they post a new map every day, and you can see sometimes that it's like red flaming hot, like it was for the Fort McMurray wildfire. Almost all of Alberta was red flaming hot, indicating extremely dry conditions. But by June, mid-June, there had been rain and everything was blue, indicating, very damp, non-inflammable conditions. So these things change within days and hours and weeks, and that's not climate change. Climate change is long, sustained periods of weather patterns that are statistically measurable over periods of time, like 30, 50, 100 years. So these extreme events are not related to climate change.
So now that the RCMP has said that the fire was human caused and criminality isn't being taken off of the table, why has no mainstream media pointed out that another theory is that this could possibly be yet another hate-motivated burning of Christian churches in the area that's gone terribly wrong? More terribly wrong than it already is to burn places of worship. I asked Staff Sergeant Choyette if the RCMP is in fact looking into this, and she stated, the BC RCMP and BC Wildfire Service investigators have completed a fulsome search of 2 areas of interest related to the possible origin of the fire. One was a 1-kilometer radius area near Lytton, and the other was a 2-kilometer radius area near Boston Bar. Investigators are focusing on a parking lot and park area at the end of the River Drive towards the south end of the village of Lytton. This area provides access to a foot and rail bridge that crosses the Fraser River. And the only thing she said, alluding to my question, is we are continuing to allow the evidence to guide the investigation and remaining open to all information coming in. She also linked a couple of articles that pointed to some information about the churches burning, but they don't specify what's happened to all of the churches. Lytton, BC, St. George's Indian Residential School was of Anglican denomination and ran from 1901 to 1979. And just a week after the first 2 churches to suspiciously catch fire in BC and the provincial government to announce it would be releasing $12 million to First Nation communities for investigative work at former residential school sites and cultural and wellness supports, Lytton First Nation Chief John Hagen informed the general public that the band was aware of 1 marked grave and several unmarked graves, and that they also were aware of other possible sites near the school, but hadn't been able to investigate them due to costs. So with the public aware of unmarked grave sites in the area, could any of Lytton, BC's churches, in particular their 2 Anglican churches, have been targets of arson? And why wasn't this theory publicly explored just as vigorously as the climate change and passing train theories? While at this time we have no evidence that has been disclosed to indicate that it was a church fire, we do know, according to this article, that the Anglican Church, St. Barnabas, is surprisingly, like a miracle, still standing. So is the village's post office. But what about the other 2 churches on the reserve and the one that burnt down right in the middle, St. Anne's, right in the center of the village? I'm really not all too surprised. Nobody wants to really talk about these churches burning at all, especially not the Prime Minister. When I tried to ask him why he hasn't yet called the burning and vandalizing over 20 churches in Canada a matter of hate. You talked about Canada's last wrongs, the past things they haven't done right. When will you speak out about the 20 vandalized churches? They're burning churches and vandalizing them, and you're not calling it a hate crime. You can catch that report at standwithdrea.com. But I will be following what's happening in this investigation with Lytton, BC closely. I mean, we're calling for climate change agendas to be had by these fires when people like this man in West Kelowna are running and throwing flames into the bush. Climate change strikes again, I guess. Now, if you appreciate this report, there was no huge bomb dropped, but it's just asking the questions that nobody else will ask. You can follow us at rebelnews.com. If you give us your phone number there and your email, we'll never lose touch, even when it comes to big tech censorship. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News. We need you to take action now, whether you're religious or not. Unless you want to live in a country where the only religion allowed is the worshiping of the government as well as the compliance, please go to saveourchurches.com. We're going to send this petition far and wide. It's going to go to our RCMP Commissioner, Brenda Lucki, our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, as well as our Public Safety Minister, Bill Blair. We must stand against this for the safety of the people in our country. Drea Humphrey with Rebel News.